Buongiorno, buongiorno. Buongiorno. Uno dice buongiorno. Buongiorno, buona domenica, benvenute, benvenuti a questo secondo appuntamento di questa mattina al Teatro Bibbiena per il Food and Science Festival. Il tema che abbiamo scelto per l'edizione di quest'anno è riflessi, come vedete scritto dappertutto, come abbiamo detto tante volte, riflessi intesi come soprattutto connessioni, collegamenti, rimandi da un ambito a un altro, da un ambiente a un altro, da un essere vivente ad altri esseri viventi. E questa mattina parliamo proprio di connessioni tra noi in quanto viventi e gli altri viventi, cioè il resto della natura, quella natura di cui facciamo parte ma che siamo più abituati a considerare come risorsa da sfruttare. Lo facciamo con un ospite d'eccezione che siamo felici abbia accettato il nostro invito. Allora, con grande piacere accolgo sul palco Anne Sverdrup-Thygeson, che ha già detto che mi perdona per la pronuncia del suo nome, ma soprattutto adesso non ha le cuffie, quindi non sa quello che io sto dicendo. Quindi anche voi non avete sentito perché è calato l'audio, dico non sa cosa sto dicendo, quindi si fiderà. Voi sorridete, così sembrerà che va tutto bene. No, Anne è una biologa vegetale, insegna all'Università di Scienze Naturali della Norvegia, è consulente scientifica dell'Istituto norvegese per la ricerca sulla natura ed è una appassionata divulgatrice scientifica. Qualcuno l'ha definita la Piero Angela della Norvegia perché partecipa a uno dei più noti programmi televisivi di divulgazione e insomma lo vedrete fra poco, è appassionata davvero. Lei racconta in questo libro, che è quello da cui sono tratti insomma un po' dei temi che affronterà questa mattina, racconta di come fin da bambina è stata molto curiosa, era una bambina curiosa che chiedeva il perché di tutto e come tutte le persone curiose che si entusiasmano quando scoprono qualcosa poi ci tengono a raccontarlo ed ecco che lei ne ha fatto un mestiere e noi siamo felici di averla qua. Io smetto di parlare e le lascio il palco per una sua presentazione, un suo discorso, al termine del quale risalirò e potremo dialogare con lei e, insomma, preparatevi tutte le domande, scatenatevi dopo. Grazie e buon ascolto. Grazie Anna.
Thank you. Buongiorno. I have a question for you first. Do you eat grass? I think most people would maybe answer no, because you will think that grass is something for cows and deer and other grazing animals. But actually, almost half of all the calories we humans consume come from grass plants. Because rice, corn, wheat, and all other types of cereals, they are simply grass plants. And whereas the cows will eat the grass leaves and the stem, we humans eat the offspring of the grass plant, the seed. And that is because the rest of the grass contains a lot of cellulose, the stuff that paper is made from, right? And we can't eat paper, so we can't eat the grass leaves and the grass stem. But the seeds of grass plants contains a lot of starch. And starch is something that we can digest. So we eat grass and a lot of other food made from plants, as well as fish and meat, of course. And behind the production of our food lies a lot of work, a lot of hidden work, from all sorts of small, anonymous species. Strange ones, small ones, unknown ones, like insects or fungi. Because we are connected to our food through countless of tiny, tiny organisms. And this amazing diversity of species and the work they do is what holds our lives together. even though we live modern, rather urban lives, most of us. Because you and I are much more tightly woven into the web of nature than you might think. For instance, 90% of all plants on this planet depend on cooperating with fungi to get the nutrients they need. Because plants have a sort of gloves on their roots, and these gloves are made by fungi. So, if you enjoy picking mushrooms now in the fall, like porcini, you should know that there is a lot more to these mushrooms than just the cap that meets your eye. Most of the mushroom is hidden beneath the forest soil, forming a concealed network of fungal threads that links trees and fungi. This relationship will help trees and other plants grow because the fungi will transfer plant nutrients and water from the soil. And in return, the fungi will receive sugars from the photosynthesis from the plant. And this is just one example of a symbiosis, a connection that we depend on but hardly think about. So, fungi are super important, and so are insects. And there is an amazing number of connections between these species and our food. And I will give you just a few examples here. They all relate to food we know and love, like pizza, herbs, wine, and chocolate. So, let me start by telling you about the secret connections of oregano. This is an example from my previous book, which is also published in Italy, with the title Terra Insecta. And this example is based on research done in Italy, so I thought it was nice to take it along here, by the University of Torino. And they describe a strange connection between three different species: the oregano plant, an ant of a specific type, specific genus, and this big, beautiful blue butterfly, called larch blue in English. So, have you ever stopped to wonder why oregano has this nice scent that we all know? It is due to a substance called carvacrol. This is the substance that gives oregano its intense herbal smell or scent. But of course, the oregano plant does not produce this scent for us. It uses it in order to get rid of insects. That's the point of it. And it does it in quite surprising ways. So, please imagine a sun-drenched hillside in northern Italy, all covered in with oregano plants. So one of the plants can feel a bit of tickling around its roots because some ants have decided to set up their nest down in the soil close to the roots of the oregano plant. They make tunnels in the soil and destroy some of the plant roots in the process. And the oregano plant does not enjoy this. But in order to get rid of the ants, it needs help. Help in the shape of a butterfly. So the oregano plant will call for help using scent. It responds to the ants munching on the roots by increasing the production of carvacrol, this oregano scent. And this aromatic substance serves as an SOS, a sort of a cry out in the language of scent. And the butterfly, this butterfly on the picture here, will respond to the SOS signal. She is drawn to that smell and she lays her egg on the oregano plant. The butterfly egg will turn into a caterpillar. As the caterpillar grows, it prepares a disguise. It hides itself in a cloak of ant scent. So it smells exactly like the ants that are pestering the oregano plant. And this is something it does because it needs to be allowed into the ant's nest in order to help both the oregano plant and itself. So after a few days, the caterpillar lets go of the plant and it tumbles to the ground. An ant comes by, picks up the butterfly caterpillar, and is tricked by the scent. So it thinks it is a lost ant baby from its own nest. So it picks it up in its mouth and carries it very carefully into the nest, down by the roots of the plant. And there, even though it differs from the ant larva, both in size and color, it is cared for, it is fed and nursed just like the ant babies by the adult ants in the nest. But this very hungry caterpillar, which needs to multiply its weight by several 100%, is not happy with the food it is given. It needs more. So the greedy caterpillar will start eating all the ant larvae in the nest until the entire ant community collapses. So peace returns to the roots of the oregano plant. The caterpillar can turn into an adult butterfly and fly off to trick other ants to feed its offspring. And all this happens without us really noticing it. So I suggest next time you sprinkle some oregano on your pizza, stop for a moment, inhale the scent, and think about all these secret ongoings that have taken place before that herb ended up in your kitchen on your food. Okay, so you have prepared your pizza with oregano, and now you might want a nice glass of wine to go with it. But before you are able to raise a glass of in toast, you need not just grapes and humans, of course, to make the wine, but also a bunch of other helpful species. One is pictured here. It's a sort of fungi. It's called brewer's yeast. It's a yeast fungi. And brewer's yeast is crucial to make wine, even though you never see it pictured on the bottles. This yeast establishes in the new grapes in the spring. It stays there through summer, and it goes when you harvest the grapes. It goes with them, and it adds to the local taste, to the flavor of the wine. But where does this yeast stay during winter, when the grapes are gone? And how does it reach the new grapes when spring comes? Recently, it has been shown that wasps of some kinds play an important role in winemaking, because certain wasps provide both accommodation and a taxi service for the yeast. The wasp's guts offer the brewer's yeast a safe, cozy place to stay when the conditions in the outdoor makes it less appealing to stay out there. And every autumn, a few wasps will hibernate, and then they can keep the brewer's yeast through the winter in their guts, and they will transport the yeast back to the new grapes when spring comes. So different wasps convey different variants of brewer's yeasts, which contributes to the unique qualities of wine. And also, in the muggy gloom of the wasp's belly, different varieties of brewer's yeast will mingle and new variants will occur. So as a result, new genetic types of brewer's yeast come about, and each of these different variants will help flavor your food in its own particular way. In other words, to make good wine, you need help both from fungi and insects. And I think a toast to the hidden connections between biodiversity and wine is well deserved next time you have a glass of your favorite wine. Okay, so you've had your pizza, knowing the secrets of oregano. You have enjoyed a glass of wasp-helped wine to go with it. So how about some chocolate for dessert? Then you should know that in order to make chocolate, another insect is needed. The cocoa tree grows in the rainforest, and it has these tiny white flowers that you see on the picture. And they need to be pollinated in order to become cocoa beans. And in order for this to happen, the tiny chocolate midge, a very, very small type of mosquito, is needed. It is the only one which is able to pollinate these small, short-lived, and really complicated flowers of the cocoa tree. And this is the only way we will have cocoa beans that we make chocolate from. So if mosquitoes annoys you, it might help to think that their distant relatives are working really hard to help produce chocolate that you can enjoy. So imagine your daily life without chocolate, without coffee, without tomatoes. This could be our new normal if we fail to look after the world's insects and enable them to pollinate our food plants. Because cocoa beans and all sorts of other fruits, berries, vegetables, and nuts are largely pollinated by insects and cannot be cultivated without the help of wild insects. Many 100,000 different species of wild pollinating insects. So without them, we cannot produce food in the same scale or as cheaply as today. So all our food production is, as a bottom line, dependent on the natural world, on the hidden connections between biodiversity and us. But we have changed this world in so many ways, and we are starting to see the effect of that. Crops are diminished by droughts. You've seen this in Italy this year. Overfishing has reduced the number of fish in the ocean. Our land use and intensive agriculture change the insect communities and make pollination of our crops less efficient. So, in order to turn these negative trends, I think we need to pay more attention to the species diversity around us and the ties between them and us. Because otherwise, it is not certain that these goods will continue to exist in the quantity or quality we wish for. So, I write books because I want to highlight this indelible link between nature's finely knit systems and our everyday lives. I want you to see through fun stories, strange stories, entertaining stories, what's at stake here, why we need to think differently about nature. We humans are just one species among 10 million. At the same time, we are unique in our ability to interact with one another, in a way that enables us to make an impact on the entire planet and pretty much all other species. But we have also uniquely evolved the capacity to evaluate our actions logically and morally from a greater perspective. With this insight comes a great responsibility, and it's time for us now to shoulder that responsibility, because nature is everything we have and everything we are. Thank you. Let's see.
Anne Sverdrup-Thygeson, l'ha fatto vedere lei, io non ci ho pensato prima, anche se l'avevo qui, Nelle mani della natura, ADD Editore, così lo nominiamo. Nel frattempo arrivano 2 sedie, e come dicevo prima potete lanciarvi se avete domande. Io questo lo devo passare a lei. Ne approfitto per salutare chi ci segue via internet, non l'ho fatto prima neanche questo.
Oh, these were big. Hang on. I don't have that big head, like this.
Ah, okay. I tried this, so it's on my head.
Okay.
The measure.
Yeah, you have more hair.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm supposed to hear something.
I think it's already.
There, here.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me in Italian?
I hear the translator, so that's good.
Che dire, possiamo sederci? Dunque, noi siamo abituati a dare un nome alle cose e a catalogarle, perché così ci sentiamo più in ordine, insomma siamo più in grado di darci una posizione e anche un ruolo nel mondo, diciamo. E tra le parole che si possono usare, le catalogazioni che si possono usare per la natura, il mondo che ci circonda, inteso mondo di esseri viventi, noi possiamo dire che intanto viviamo sulle spalle della natura, viviamo grazie alla natura e facciamo non troppo però per la natura. E la natura ci fornisce dei servizi, visto dal nostro punto di vista, dei servizi che sono di produzione, abbiamo visto degli esempi prima, cioè prendiamo cose che ci servono dalla natura, dei servizi di regolazione, come abbiamo visto anche prima, lo scambio dei nutrienti oppure il ciclo dell'acqua, insomma, e dei servizi anche culturali che poi potremo vedere più avanti, magari facciamo qualche esempio. Allora, tra i servizi di regolazione ci sono quelli che ci permettono di avere un continuo riciclo delle sostanze, appunto, e rigenerazione delle sostanze, tra queste l'acqua. E arrivo al punto. Io non lo sapevo, ammetto la mia ignoranza, ma a New York c'è un depuratore naturale che funziona da anni e fornisce acqua potabile alla città. Ho capito bene?
Yes. Yes, New York City is a nice example of the regulating services. Because back in the 1990s, New York City were facing new rules about the quality of drinking water. So they planned to build a new big plant to filter the water, and that would cost, millions of dollars to make. And it would make the water much more expensive through the water tax for the city's inhabitants. But then some smart person thought, why don't we use nature? Nature can clean water for free. So instead of spending all these millions of dollars on a new filtering plant for the water, they used just a small amount of that money to buy land upstreams from New York City in the watershed, where all the rainwater comes down to end up in the Hudson River. So they bought that land and made sure it was not developed. And then all the diversity, all these tiny species, all the fungi, all the mosses, all the insects, all the invertebrates will clean the water for free. And today, New York City has one of the best drinking waters in the US. It's called the champagne of drinking water. And they're really, really proud of it. And it's all done by nature. So I think that is an example of, if we just let nature be nature, we can not harvest, but feel the good results of nature's work, and it doesn't really cost anything. It's good, it's smart of us in so many ways to sort of play on the same team as nature instead of fighting it. I think we have much to learn from thinking more like that.
E noi, come facciamo la manutenzione dei nostri depuratori e dei nostri strumenti, dovremmo avere cura di fare manutenzione anche dei depuratori naturali, insomma dei sistemi naturali di regolazione, perché prima di tutto nel nostro interesse.
Yes, diseases. So disease regulation is complicated, and it works in many ways, but often there are connections between species that are hard for us to see. It can be regulations, for instance, in the crop system. It can be pest species that we have, when we grow the same crop all over with monocultures, we sort of lay the table for certain species that want to eat the same food as us. If we allow a more heterogeneous nature, if we plant strips of natural vegetation in between the cropland, for instance, there will be more room for predators. There will be also more room for pollinating insects. But in that way, we can sort of keep more of this dynamic balance of nature and also help us use less pesticides, for instance, and get our food in a smarter way. So that's just one example. There are also many relating more to our health, human health. I'm not sure if that was what you were thinking about.
Dicevamo prima, la natura ci fornisce anche dei servizi culturali, perché per esempio è un grande archivio, dai pollini che si trovano in fondo alle paludi, alle bolle d'aria nel ghiaccio in profondità che ci servono per sapere com'era il clima di centinaia di migliaia di anni fa. Ecco, non so se vuol farci qualche esempio di questo grande archivio, questa grande biblioteca naturale che abbiamo a disposizione e che scopriamo man mano che esiste e scopriamo man mano come sfruttare, come leggere, ecco.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fun examples on the natural archives. One is how we can read tree time, read through the annual rings of trees as they grow. We can use dendrochronology, which literally means tree time, the time of trees. And of course, you know that these rings are made in the growing season. So if it's a nice, warm growing season, it will be a big ring. If it's a bad summer, it will be a small ring. And this we can use to find out when wooden material has been growing. And there are some amazing examples on this about this music instrument, which has been a big discussion, who actually made it, if it was these famous two Italian brothers that made it, and I've forgotten, sorry, the name of those, but maybe you remember. Not Armani, but something like that.
Talk.
And then someone else thought that could not be the case. And by looking at the annual rings in this musical instrument, you can synchronize sort of the pattern of big rings and small rings and small rings and big rings with the chronology you have made from other trees, all the way back to 1500s. And by doing this, they actually solved this riddle. They found out that the tree that was made to make the music instrument had actually been harvested, had been cut, before these Italian brothers started before they were living. So it could not be them that had made this music instrument. So you can actually use these natural archives to solve riddles, even crimes, and there are similar examples also from the Viking ships in my country, Norway, where one of these beautiful big graves were plundered, and the thieves left their shovels when they, back several hundred years ago, when they dug into this big mold of soil where the ship was buried. And so by looking at the tree rings, the annual rings in the shovel, they could actually, the researchers could say exactly when the thieves had been there, judging from when they had, when their shovel was from. So there are all these strange examples of what we can use nature for in this sort of archive system.
I due fratelli liutai erano i fratelli Amati, Girolamo e Antonio Amati, gli liutai del 1600. Ieri sera abbiamo avuto un concerto di archi, quindi non erano strumenti, credo, degli fratelli Amati, ma insomma erano strumenti preziosi, suonati bene soprattutto. Tra i servizi di produzione, tornando indietro, c'è naturalmente uno dei più grandi, che è quello della farmacia. Cioè la natura è la nostra farmacia ed è fonte di molecole che ci servono per curarci, e anche di molecole che poi noi riproduciamo in laboratorio, copiamo perché è più facile, più economico e ci permette di farle su larga scala, riprodurle dopo aver capito quali sono e che effetti hanno su di noi. E quindi al di là del servizio farmaceutico, diciamo, la natura è anche una grande fonte di ispirazione, cioè noi usiamo direttamente quello che ci fornisce, ma spesso e volentieri copiamo quello che fa per realizzare qualche cosa che è più affine ai nostri scopi. Insomma, quindi prendiamo l'esempio della natura e poi ne costruiamo qualcos'altro per qualunque tipo di scopo, dai colori ai materiali per la costruzione, le fibre per i tessuti. Insomma, anche qui ci sono 1000 esempi.
Yes, there are many examples. For instance, another beautiful blue butterfly, the one that lives in South America, the big morpho butterfly, has the color of that butterfly is not really color, it's not pigments, it's just microstructures on the surface. And by copying those microstructures, researchers can make color that never fades. They can make fabric with beautiful colors that will never fade in sunlight. We have also used the leaves of the lotus flower, because if you imagine a lotus flower and the leaves that float, on the water, they are always clean, perfectly clean. And that is also due to microstructures that will have the water just sort of it never really touches the surface, it just stands on tiny little bumps. And then the water will roll very easily off the surface of the lotus leaf, bringing dust and dirt with it. And this structure, again, we have copied to make self-cleaning material, self-cleaning windows, self-cleaning surfaces, that you can just, put water on them and then all the dirt comes off. So these are different examples that illustrates how we can copy nature. And I think also mentioning pharmacy, it's nice to quote the example from the horseshoe crab, which really helped us a lot in this pandemic that we just went through or are still partly in, because the horseshoe crab is a strange creature living in the ocean. It is actually not a crab, it's a relative of the spiders. And it has looked the same for 400 million years. And it has this really, really strange capacity. It has blue blood. The blood is really like baby blue color. And when that blood comes into contact with bacterial poisons, it will turn into a jelly. So it will change very, very, very quickly. And we use this to check that vaccines and all other things that we will put into a human body that will come in contact with our blood, that they are safe and free from these poisons from bacteria. So all the batches of the COVID vaccine that we were given, they are by law needed to be checked by this blood from a horseshoe crab before they are sort of put out in the world. And I think that's quite amazing. I mean, how many knows this? How many of us thought about this when we sat there getting the shot of the vaccine? And it also illustrates this paradox that sort of runs through most of my book, that we are so good at using nature in many ways. But in that lies also the risk of destroying, because all the 4 species of horseshoe crabs that lives on this planet are now threatened. They are on the global red list. And that is partly because we are harvesting them, because we take them from the sea and we harvest their blood, and sometimes, at least in the US, they put them back again in the ocean, but still it has an effect. And we also destroy the beaches where they come up to lay their eggs. And I think this sort of irony in this species that had lived for 400 million years, that helps us so much in this crisis we have been through. And I think and now it is threatened. I really hope that we will see that we need to sort of give something back to nature. Nature is everything we have, everything we are. And in order for this to go on, for us to have nice lives in the generations to come, I think we really need to start to think about these connections more and treat nature in a way that respects the importance of these connections much more than we do today. That was a very long answer.
It's good. In Italia sulle spiagge a volte noi facciamo i concerti, quindi io vi chiedo se ci sono domande, appunto. Sì, c'è già una mano alzata là e una qui. Prima.
Thank you very much for the speech. It was really really interesting and deep. Could I have a provocative question? Because you say we have 10 million species, but how do we know we need all of them? Could we get rid of some of them? Like some people think that we should eliminate all mosquitoes, as an example. I mean, it's not my idea, as a matter of fact, but how do we know we need all 10 or maybe 30 or maybe 100 million species? Thank you.
The answer is we don't know. And I think you can answer this question in different ways. One is, of course, to say that we don't know which species we need. And then, to be on the safe side, we should take care of as many as possible. Sometimes you can think of this example of a plane. You can be flying a plane, and you can probably, loosen some of the screws that holds that plane together, that airplane together. You can probably still fly. Maybe you can loosen 2 or 3 or 20 of these bolts and screws on a plane, but at some stage, sometime, it will not fly any longer, it will not work, and then the effect can be quite catastrophic. That's also a picture we could use for nature, although I think it's a bit too dramatic, because nature is very flexible. Evolution is going on as we speak. But the thing is that we have so much to earn by keeping many different species, especially when we know that we are facing climate change. Then we want to have as many species as possible. Some will be good, for instance, to pollinate when it gets warmer. Other species will be good at pollinating when it gets wetter. So if we have many species, it's like a big toolbox that will help us. It will be more robust in times to come, and especially knowing climate change is going on. And then yet another way to answer your question, which is a very good question, is of course to address the fact that many species, many people will think that species also have a right of their own to exist. That even though we don't see their usefulness, or even though we don't think they are beautiful, they still have a right to live out their strange life potential. This is more of a moral argument, and of course we can think differently about that. But I think, again, to come back to this little blue planet I had in my slide, I think we are so super lucky to be living on this one tiny, tiny spot in the entire universe where we know that there is life. I mean, how amazing is that? And I think being so lucky, we owe these other millions of species that we share the planet with to behave a bit differently, to find a way to live together with them for our sake and for their sake.
C'era una domanda lì.
We often hear about how we humans, we threaten other species, and that sometimes in the past we were correctly integrating with them, sometimes not, it's not the case. But we often know about this ex post, when the damage is done, when it's too late sometimes even. The question is, have we been building a sort of principles in general about how to correctly and also efficiently interact with other species beforehand, before the damage is done?
If we still have time, yeah. Yes, I think we still have time, but the time, the window is sort of closing. And this is, of course, not something that just I am saying as a conservation biologist, but if you look to the United Nations and IPBES, which is the nature panel, the sister panel to the much more well-known climate panel, the IPCC, the IPBES, the nature panel, they have put together all knowledge we have on species diversity and ecosystem services. And what they conclude is that, yes, we still have time, but we need what they call a transformative change. We need to, not just to do things a little bit differently, but a completely new way of thinking about nature, acting with nature. And they also say something very interesting, I think, in this conclusion of the big report they made a few years back now. They say that often going through such a transformative change is difficult, and many will want to keep status quo, especially maybe some of the big businesses will want to keep it that way. But if enough of sort of lay people, if we all work together on this, change is possible. And I think this is super motivating, and this is also part of the reason why I spend time writing books and go around doing outreach, talking about these things, because I really believe in the huge, immense sort of power that lies in the summed engagement of all of us, of everyone. We can get so much done if we are sort of all in, and then we can turn around really quickly. Again, I mean, the COVID crisis showed us that we can turn really quick. We can change the way we live our lives overnight if we see that something big is at stake. And I mean, we have many challenges in the world today. Of course, we still have COVID out there. We have war in Europe. We have the climate crisis, and we have the biodiversity crisis. But I think there is hope in change if we just sort of stand together in this. And it's possible to create a world where we can all have, where it's easier for people to have good health, sufficient food, and clean drinking water without over-exploiting nature. But I think really what we need then is, of course, brave politicians. But to get brave politicians, I think it is all of us that needs to sort of speak up, to become engaged, to get knowledge, and to start taking part in this transformative change.
Il libro, che è molto bello, lo dico, inizia con una citazione di Rachel Carson, che è autrice di Primavera Silenziosa, che ha dato il via in qualche modo al movimento ambientalista, che dice: quel che ho scoperto è che era in pericolo tutto ciò cui io, in quanto naturalista, tenevo di più, e che qualunque altra cosa io facessi non avrebbe avuto maggiore importanza di questa. E Anne, allo stesso modo, si dice bisogna, come dicevo prima, raccontare a tutti prima di tutto la meraviglia della natura, e poi riuscire a convincere del valore che ha. E, abbiamo pochi minuti, abbiamo pochi secondi. Come si fa?
I think we need to use to think positively, to use the nice stories, the entertaining stories, the fun stories, to trigger people's curiousness and awe, this respect for all the connections, how fantastic it is. And I think these things that you learn about, if you engage in them, you will also love them. And these things work back on each other. I think it's a quote, it says in the Bible that what your mouth is full of, now what your heart is full of, your mouth will speak. So what you have in your heart, what you really are engaged in, what you love, what you think is important, will also be what you speak, will be what you engage in. So I think finding the way into people's hearts, making nature and biodiversity find a place in people's hearts, I think that is the way forward.
Facciamolo, insomma. Non so se ci sono altre domande. Non vedo mani alzate. Sì, prego, arriva un microfono subito.
Very interesting. My question goes more into how society has changed, because in the past, especially in Italy and the Mediterranean countries, the relationship between human beings and nature was much more close. The landscapes were much more cultivated, and so people would eat from what they would work every day. And nowadays, everything has changed, because with globalization, people earn money and food somewhere else. So I think your ideas are interesting, but somehow can be a bit critical scene, because society has changed, and in Italy, in Norway, and everywhere, there's people that are suffering, being exploited to bring us food. So, and also in the past, in ancient times, people already knew a lot about nature and plants. And a lot of the treatises from the Latin times and Greek times already told us a lot about that. And still that knowledge is still valid. So how do you think society needs to change in that way?
I think we
Un
are...
minuto sempre.
Pardon?
Sempre in just 1 minute. To
Yeah,
answer.
very short.
No,
Oh.
no, I'm joking.
A big question and short time. Yeah. I mean, this is not easy. Of course it is not easy. I often say that we have 3 crises. We have the climate crisis, we have the biodiversity crisis, and we have the, what you call it in English, the fairness crisis or the equality crisis. Because we also, of course, need to think about how we treat each other as humans. I mean, this is not, I don't have the answer to how to do this. I don't think anyone has. But exactly because it is difficult, we need to talk about this. We need to discuss this more. This is why we need engagement, because no one has the one answer to how this can be done. It's going to be complicated. But we don't really have any choice, as I see it. We need to sort of step up to this challenge. And I think we need to spend much more time discussing how we treat nature, how we treat each other, how we should build a world that is good for us and the coming generations. And this is something everyone needs to engage in, because regardless of where you live, what political party you vote for, the effects of these crises will hit us all in the same way. So we're literally in the same boat here, and we should want to engage and to try to work to find solutions together.
Siamo davvero in chiusura. E io chiuderei ribadendo quello che Anne Sverdrup-Thygeson ha detto all'inizio e che è emerso più volte durante questa chiacchierata, cioè noi facciamo parte della natura, quindi la natura è tutto quello che noi abbiamo, ma la natura è anche tutto quello che noi siamo, quindi è il messaggio che dobbiamo tenere presente. Grazie Anne Sverdrup-Thygeson.
Thank you.
Grazie a tutti voi che avete partecipato, a chi ci ha seguito da casa. Il festival continua negli altri luoghi di Mantova. Buona domenica.